Have you ever wondered why your mind feels tired even when your body isn't moving? Why you feel confused even though nothing is actually wrong? It's because you've been living too fast for too long. Your soul has been whispering to you, slow down. Your mind has been begging you, walk alone for a while. But you were too busy, too distracted, too overwhelmed to hear it. Buddhism teaches us that clarity isn't something you chase. It's something that arrives when you stop running. And the truth is this: the moment you finally slow your life down, the noise inside you begins to fade, and the answers you've been searching for quietly rise to the surface. Today, I'm going to show you why walking slowly, alone, might just be the most powerful decision you make for your peace, your clarity, and your entire life. 1. Slow movements calm a fast mind. Most people move fast, not because life demands speed, but because their minds are overwhelmed. They rush from one task to another, one conversation to another, one problem to another, not realizing that the pace of their body is a reflection of the storm inside them. When a person is carrying anxiety, confusion, fear, or unresolved emotions, they often try to stay busy so they don't have to feel what's happening within. Buddhism explains this beautifully. The faster you move, the more you disconnect from yourself. You stop noticing your thoughts, you stop understanding your emotions, and you stop hearing the quiet voice of your inner wisdom. But something powerful happens when you intentionally slow your movements. Your breathing becomes softer and deeper, your shoulders drop, your heartbeat relaxes, your senses open. Instead of reacting instantly to everything around you, your mind begins observing. Walking slowly isn't just a physical action, it becomes a form of meditation. It is psychological medicine, a natural antidote to the pressure and chaos your mind has been carrying. Every gentle step is like sending a message to your nervous system. You are safe. You can relax. There is no danger here. In a world filled with constant alerts, noise, notifications, and deadlines, your body forgets what safety feels like. Slowing down reminds your entire being that life is not an emergency, that peace is available in this very moment if you choose to enter it. When your body moves slowly, your mind no longer feels the need to run. Thoughts stop colliding with each other. The confusion begins to separate. The fog starts to lift. Clarity emerges, not because the problems disappeared, but because your mind finally has enough stillness to understand them. And in this stillness, answers begin to appear. Answers that were always there but hidden underneath your panic, your rush, your stress, and your fear. When you walk slowly, you realize that clarity is not something you chase. It is something you allow. It rises naturally in a mind that has been given space, silence, and softness to breathe. 2. Solitude clears the fog that people create. There are moments in life when the presence of others becomes too heavy for your mind to carry. Not because people are bad, but because every person you interact with brings their own emotions, expectations, energies, opinions, and judgments into your space. Over time, this noise creates a fog inside you. You start absorbing worries that aren't yours, desires that aren't yours, and beliefs that don't belong to you. Without realizing it, you begin living according to what others expect, rather than what your soul truly needs. Buddhism teaches that the mind cannot become clear when it is crowded, and the heart cannot find peace when it is constantly trying to adjust itself for others. This is why solitude becomes essential, not optional, not a luxury, but a deep emotional necessity. When you choose to walk alone, even for a short season of your life, you give yourself the space to breathe again. You give your thoughts room to stretch without interruption. You create an environment where your mind can finally speak without being drowned out by external voices. Solitude is not an escape from people. It is a return to yourself. In solitude, you start noticing things you once ignored. You see which emotions genuinely belong to you and which ones were shaped by the people around you. You realize how certain habits or dreams were built from social pressure and not from your own heart. You finally hear your inner voice, a voice that had been whispering under all the noise but never had the chance to be fully heard. Walking alone, slowly and quietly, becomes a journey back to your truth. Solitude also purifies your emotional system. It removes the layers of confusion that accumulated from constantly listening to others. It separates your identity from the identities of the people you spend time with. It allows you to understand your values, your limits, your desires, and your boundaries without being influenced by anyone else. This is why clarity often appears during moments of quiet isolation. It isn't magic. It is simply the result of creating mental space. And the more time you spend alone in a calm, slow rhythm, the more you realize that much of your stress was never actually yours. It belonged to the world. It belonged to expectations. It belonged to the noise. When you step away from that noise, even temporarily, you begin to see your life with a depth and sharpness that feels almost impossible when you are surrounded by too many voices. Solitude doesn't disconnect you from life. It reconnects you to it in a purer, more honest way. 3. Silence is a teacher you've been avoiding. Silence is one of the most powerful teachers in the world, yet it is the one most people fear the most. The modern mind has become addicted to noise music playing in the background, conversations buzzing, notifications popping, screens flashing, thoughts racing. People feel uncomfortable the moment things go quiet, because silence forces them to meet themselves. It brings forward every feeling they buried, every thought they avoided, every truth they were not ready to face. But Buddhism teaches that silence is not empty or frightening. It is the doorway to understanding yourself on the deepest level. When you walk slowly in silence, without distractions, something profound happens. Your mind finally stops being pushed from one stimulus to another. Instead of reacting instantly, you start observing. Instead of drowning in unfinished thoughts, you begin seeing them clearly. Silence gives you the space to notice things you ignore during your busy life. How tense your body feels, how loud your inner critic speaks, how much worry you carry in your chest, how many emotions you never allowed yourself to process. Silence shines a light on everything that needs your attention, not to overwhelm you, but to free you. People avoid silence because silence is honest. It doesn't lie, it doesn't pretend, it doesn't hide. When you are silent, you hear the truth about your life that noise has been covering up. You notice which relationships drain your energy. You realize which dreams are truly yours and which ones you've outgrown. You understand why certain habits are destroying your peace. You become aware of how much stress you have normalized without even realizing it. Silence becomes the mirror that reflects your true inner state. And yet, this honesty is exactly what makes silence so healing. When you sit with yourself in quiet, when you walk slowly without rushing, your mind begins to soften. Your heartbeat slows down. Your emotions start settling like water that has finally stopped being shaken. Thoughts that once looked huge and frightening become manageable. Problems you thought were impossible suddenly seem simpler. You begin to understand the deeper reasons behind your fears, your doubts, and your emotional reactions. Silence teaches you to listen to your intuition, your body, your heart, and the wisdom that naturally rises when the mind is not overwhelmed. In silence, you learn that peace is not something you find outside. It is something you uncover within. The world cannot give it to you, and the world cannot take it away. Silence shows you that clarity is your natural state, but you have buried it under layers of noise, distraction, and constant stimulation. Once you remove those layers, even for a few minutes a day, you start reconnecting with the person you truly are. Finally, silence teaches you a lesson that changes everything. You cannot heal if you keep running from yourself. When you embrace silence instead of avoiding it, you allow your mind to rest, your heart to open, and your inner wisdom to rise. Walking slowly in silence is not just peaceful, it is transformational. It helps you see the truth, accept the truth, and ultimately live the truth. 4. Your mind has been asking for rest, not more effort. Most people believe that the solution to their problems is to push harder, think more, work more, try more, do more. They assume that if they keep forcing their mind to produce answers, clarity will eventually appear. But the truth is the opposite. The more pressure you put on your mind, the more clouded it becomes. The more you force yourself to think, the more tangled your thoughts become. Your mind is not a machine that improves with extra load. Your mind is a living, delicate space that needs gentleness to function at its best. Buddhism teaches that a mind without rest cannot see clearly, no matter how intelligent or strong a person is. When you constantly push yourself, your mind enters a state of survival, narrow, tense, reactive. You start overthinking. You panic about the future. You replay mistakes from the past. You keep looking for solutions, but all you find is more confusion. This happens because the mind is exhausted, not because you are weak. Your mind has been whispering for a long time. Slow down. Put the weight down. Breathe. Give me space. But the world teaches you the opposite. Keep moving, keep pushing, keep grinding, and so you end up fighting your own biology, forcing a tired mind to behave like a fresh one. This is where walking slowly becomes so powerful. When you slow your pace, you interrupt the cycle of forcing and enter a state of allowing. You give your mind permission to soften, to stretch, to release tension. You create room between your thoughts instead of squeezing them together. And in that room, clarity begins to grow. When the mind feels safe and rested, it naturally begins to organize itself. Thoughts that felt chaotic line up in order. Emotions you couldn't understand start making sense. Problems that looked big lose their power. Think of your mind like muddy water. The more you shake it, the cloudier it becomes. But if you let it sit in stillness, the dirt falls to the bottom and the water becomes clear. This is what rest does for the mind. It returns it to clarity without effort. You don't have to push the mud down. You don't have to work hard to make the water clear. You simply have to stop shaking it. Walking slowly, breathing deeply, and allowing your mind to rest works the same way. You don't need to force answers. They rise naturally when the mind is calm. Many people misunderstand rest. They think rest means being lazy or unproductive. But true rest is not doing nothing. It is repairing your mind. It is cleaning the mental space. It is giving your thoughts the softness they need to form clearly. In Buddhism, rest is considered a form of wisdom because only a rested mind can see reality as it is. Your mind has been carrying more weight than you realize: unspoken worries, unprocessed emotions, silent fears, unexpressed disappointment, hidden stress. Rest allows all of that to settle. Without rest, you move through life blurry, reacting to everything with too much intensity. With rest, you respond with clarity, peace, and understanding. The situation doesn't change, but your relationship with it transforms. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: rest is not something you earn. Rest is something you require. You don't have to deserve it. You don't have to wait for it. You don't have to feel guilty for needing it. The mind cannot think clearly if it is constantly exhausted. And the moment you slow down, whether through walking, breathing, or silence, you give your mind the medicine it has been begging for, the chance to reset. When you allow yourself to move slowly and gently, you realize something powerful. You were never lacking intelligence. You were lacking space. You were never lacking answers. You were lacking calm. You were never lacking ability. You were lacking rest. And the moment you finally give your mind the rest it deserves, you begin to see the world with clarity you didn't know was possible. 5. The path becomes visible only when you stop running. One of the greatest illusions in life is the belief that if you move fast enough, work hard enough, or chase solutions aggressively enough, you will eventually find clarity. But Buddhism teaches the opposite. The faster you run, the more you blur your own path. When you live in a state of rushing, everything around you becomes unclear. You make choices from stress, not wisdom. You react to situations instead of understanding them. You cling to temporary feelings instead of long-term truths. And over time you begin to feel lost, not because your life lacks direction, but because you've been moving too quickly to see where you're going. The truth is that clarity does not come to a mind that is running. It comes to a mind that is grounded, calm, and present. When you stop rushing through life, your mind finally has the chance to observe the details it always ignored. You begin noticing patterns in your behavior that were shaping your life without your awareness. You become aware of which relationships bring you peace and which ones disturb it. You realize which dreams are genuine and which ones are borrowed from society. You understand which habits nourish your mind and which ones weaken it. These realizations don't appear because your problems disappeared, but because you finally slowed down enough to see clearly. Imagine driving a car at high speed. Even if you pass something important, a warning sign, a beautiful moment, a potential danger, you won't notice it because you're moving too fast. Life works the same way. Many of the answers you are searching for are already around you, but speed removes your ability to see them. When you slow down your pace physically, mentally, and emotionally, your inner vision sharpens. Instead of feeling lost, you begin to see the next step right in front of you. Walking slowly alone is one of the simplest and most powerful ways to reconnect with the path of your life. When you take gentle steps, your breathing becomes steady and your awareness expands. Your mind begins to settle into the present moment, where clarity naturally lives. You begin feeling the subtle shifts inside you, what your heart is drawn toward, what your intuition warns you about, what your soul wants to release, and what your spirit wants to move toward. This internal guidance was always there, but you could only hear it when you stopped drowning in speed. Running often comes from fear, fear of falling behind, fear of missing out, fear of facing yourself, fear of making mistakes, fear of uncertainty. When fear controls your pace, your steps become desperate and unsteady. But when you slow your movements and your mind settles, you begin to realize that clarity was never outside of you. It was never something you had to chase. It was always something that emerges when you stop running from your own inner world. Slowing down also teaches you patience. You learn that you don't need to know the entire path to take the next step. You start understanding that direction is more important than speed. You begin seeing that life is not a race. It is a journey where what matters is not how fast you reach your destination, but how deeply you understand yourself along the way. And here's the deeper truth. Your future doesn't need you to rush. It needs you to align. It needs you to walk with awareness, not anxiety. It needs you to move with intention, not panic. When you slow down, the decisions you make come from a wiser, calmer version of you, the version that sees the full picture instead of reacting to temporary emotions. Eventually, you begin to trust that clarity always arrives in the moments of stillness. It arrives when you pause, breathe, reflect, and reconnect with your inner truth. It arrives when you stop forcing life and start flowing with it. And as you walk slowly through your days, you begin to notice something beautiful. The path was never hidden. It was just waiting for you to slow down long enough to see it. 6. Inner clarity comes only when you stop overstimulating your mind. In today's world, the mind is not just busy. It is overstimulated to a level that human beings were never designed to handle. From the moment you wake up, your senses are attacked by noise, screens, notifications, opinions, expectations, ads, content, messages, and endless demands on your attention. You take in more information in one single week than people 200 years ago took in during their entire lifetime. And while the world celebrates this as progress, Buddhism teaches a simple truth that modern people have forgotten. The mind becomes chaotic, not because life is difficult, but because the mind is absorbing more than it can peacefully digest. Most people don't realize that mental clarity disappears the moment the brain becomes overstimulated. When you're constantly scrolling, constantly watching, constantly comparing, constantly analyzing, constantly consuming, your mind gets stuck in a loop. Thoughts start racing. Emotions get louder. Worries multiply. You stop being able to distinguish between what matters and what doesn't. You lose the natural rhythm of your mind and replace it with a non-stop storm of mental noise. In this storm, clarity cannot survive, peace cannot breathe, wisdom cannot rise. Your inner truth cannot be heard. Buddhism teaches that overstimulation is one of the biggest obstacles to enlightenment, not because the content you consume is bad, but because too much of anything creates imbalance. The mind needs space. It needs silence. It needs pauses. It needs emptiness. It needs stretches of time where nothing is entering, nothing is forcing, nothing is distracting. But in modern life, silence feels unnatural, almost uncomfortable, because people have forgotten how to be with themselves in stillness. They have become dependent on noise to avoid facing their unresolved emotions, their unhealed wounds, and their deeper truths. This is where the practice of walking slowly becomes powerful beyond words. When you walk slowly without your phone, without music, without podcasts, without distractions, your brain finally gets a chance to detox from overstimulation. Think of your mind like a house that has been collecting dust for years. You can wipe it quickly, but it will only get clean when you move slowly, intentionally, patiently, giving every corner the attention it deserves. Walking slowly is like cleaning the mind from the inside. It gives your thoughts the space to settle. It lets emotions breathe. It allows buried feelings to rise gently instead of exploding from pressure. When you remove external stimulation, your internal world begins to awaken. Suddenly you notice your breath. You notice how tense your shoulders have become. You notice how your chest feels heavy from unspoken stress. You notice how fast your thoughts were running without your permission. You notice that your mind was exhausted long before your body ever felt tired. These realizations don't appear when you rush from one distraction to another. They appear when you slow down and give your awareness the space it has been starved of. The nervous system also begins to shift when overstimulation stops. The body moves from a state of survival into a state of regulation. Your heartbeat steadies, your breathing deepens, your muscles relax, your mind begins to soften. The constant background alertness your brain was holding finally dissolves. You begin to feel safe inside your own body again. This inner safety is what allows clarity to return. A mind that feels threatened cannot be wise. A mind that feels overwhelmed cannot be calm. A mind that feels chased cannot see the path clearly. But when you stop overstimulating your senses, your mind feels the first real peace it has felt in a long time. And once the mind enters this calm, uncluttered state, clarity begins to rise naturally. You don't have to fight for it. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to think harder. It appears on its own, because clarity is the natural state of a peaceful mind. You begin understanding problems you once found confusing. You see solutions that were invisible when your thoughts were scattered. You understand why certain habits drain your energy. You notice which people create mental heaviness the moment you think about them. You realize what decisions you've been delaying and why. All of this awareness flows effortlessly when overstimulation ends. Another powerful transformation happens when you reduce mental noise. Your intuition finally becomes audible. Most people have strong intuition, but they don't recognize it because it gets drowned under thousands of thoughts. The mind talks loudly, the intuition whispers, and in an overstimulated mind, the whisper cannot be heard. But when you slow down, when you walk gently, when you remove distractions, the whisper becomes clear. You begin feeling and knowing things without needing logical explanation. You sense when something is wrong. You sense when something is right. You sense when to let go. You sense when to move forward. You sense when to distance yourself from people and when to open your heart again. Intuition is the soul's voice, and overstimulation is the wall that blocks it. The more you reduce stimulation, the more you begin to recognize your true thoughts from the artificial ones. Many of the thoughts that cause stress are not truly yours. They come from comparison, fear of judgment, pressure from society, or constant exposure to the lives of others. When you disconnect from all of that noise, your authentic thoughts rise to the surface. You discover what you genuinely want, not what the world has conditioned you to want. You understand your natural pace, not the pace others forced onto you. You begin to reclaim the parts of your identity that overstimulation buried under layers of noise. Walking slowly also gives you the ability to process emotions properly. When the mind is constantly stimulated, emotions get stuck inside you. They don't get expressed or understood, they get suppressed. This leads to anxiety, mood swings, emotional numbness, and a general sense of heaviness that follows you everywhere. But when you slow down, you finally create emotional space for these feelings to rise and be acknowledged. You might notice sadness you never allowed yourself to feel. You might recognize anger you kept avoiding. You might uncover fears that were hiding behind constant distraction. And as these emotions rise gently, they begin to release. Emotional clarity is impossible when the mind is busy absorbing new noise. Eventually, as you continue to walk slowly, reducing stimulation day by day, something beautiful happens. You begin to feel a sense of inner spaciousness. It feels like your mind has room again, room to think, room to breathe, room to imagine, room to heal, room to grow. You no longer feel mentally trapped. You're not drowning in information. You're not reacting to the world's pace. You're not overstimulated and overwhelmed. You become calm, grounded, balanced. You become someone who moves through life intentionally, not impulsively. And this is when true clarity appears. Not the temporary clarity that comes from a motivational video or a short moment of inspiration, but deep inner clarity, the kind that reshapes your entire way of living. You begin to see your purpose with greater sharpness. You make decisions from wisdom, not fear. You choose relationships from awareness, not loneliness. You set boundaries without guilt. You understand what your mind truly needs to stay peaceful. You begin to create a life that aligns with your nature, instead of fighting against it. Buddhism teaches that stillness is not an escape. It is a return to your essence, a return to your inner truth, a return to the clarity that has always lived inside you. But you can only return when you stop overstimulating your senses and give your mind the silence it deserves. Clarity was never absent. It was simply buried under too much noise. Peace was never gone. It was hidden beneath constant distraction. Wisdom was never missing. It was overshadowed by overstimulation. And the moment you choose to walk slowly, quietly, and mindfully, you reconnect with the version of yourself that can finally see clearly again. 7. The slow path leads to a stronger you. Most people grow up believing that strength is something loud, fast, aggressive, intense, or forceful. They think power comes from always being busy, always being productive, always being ahead, always pushing, always competing, always showing the world that they are doing something. But Buddhism teaches a truth that opposes modern thinking completely. Real strength is not fast, loud, or forceful. It is slow, calm, steady, and deeply rooted. The strongest person is not the one who rushes, but the one who moves through life with intention. The strongest mind is not the one filled with noise, but the one filled with clarity. And the strongest heart is not the one that fights everything, but the one that understands everything. When you slow your life down, you begin to discover a version of yourself that you didn't even know existed. A version of you that is not controlled by pressure. A version of you that doesn't panic at every challenge. A version of you that does not base decisions on fear or insecurity. A version of you that actually has the time, the awareness, and the emotional space to respond wisely rather than impulsively. This is the beginning of real inner strength, the kind that does not collapse when life becomes difficult. Walking slowly is not weakness. Walking slowly is not laziness. Walking slowly is not falling behind. Walking slowly is choosing to move in alignment with your inner wisdom instead of being dragged by the world's expectations. When you adopt this slower pace, your entire life begins to shift from survival mode to conscious living. You stop living on autopilot. You stop rushing through your days without understanding what you're doing or why you're doing it. You stop allowing your emotions, your fears, and the expectations of others to dictate your direction. Instead, you begin to walk in a way that connects your mind, your body, and your spirit in every step. The slow path teaches you patience, but not the superficial patience most people talk about. This is the patience that strengthens your nervous system, the patience that helps you remain calm in moments when your old self would have panicked, the patience that allows you to wait for the right opportunities instead of chasing the wrong ones. The patience that gives you the ability to hold your ground instead of collapsing under pressure. When you practice slow movement, slow thinking, slow decision-making, and slow emotional processing, you develop the kind of inner stability that cannot be shaken by external chaos. Slowness reveals mastery, mastery over your impulses, mastery over your reactions, mastery over your thoughts. When you move slowly, you become aware of how much of your life was driven by unconscious habits. You realize how often you reacted before thinking. You see how many decisions were based on fear rather than clarity. You notice how your emotions used to pull you in directions that didn't serve your peace. The slow path exposes all the places where your life was moving too fast for your wisdom to catch up. And once you see these things clearly, you begin to take back your power piece by piece. One of the greatest transformations that happens on the slow path is the strengthening of emotional resilience. When you walk slowly through your life, you learn how to hold emotions without being overwhelmed by them. Instead of suppressing your feelings or escaping them, you sit with them, breathe with them, understand them, and let them pass naturally. You begin to realize that emotions don't need to be fought. They simply need space to move through you. This emotional maturity becomes one of your greatest strengths because it allows you to remain grounded even in the most difficult moments. Another profound gift of the slow path is the development of a stronger sense of self. When your life is fast, you don't have time to question things. You follow patterns without thinking. You allow people to influence you without understanding how deeply their energy affects you. You chase goals that don't belong to you. But when you slow down, you gain the clarity to evaluate everything in your life, your habits, your relationships, your dreams, your environment, your values. You begin to see what supports your growth and what destroys it. You recognize who respects your boundaries and who uses you. You understand what nourishes your mind and what drains it. This level of self-awareness gives you a sense of identity that cannot be taken away by comparison, judgment, or external pressure. Slowing down also teaches you how to respond to challenges with wisdom rather than fear. When you are rushing, every problem feels urgent and overwhelming. When you are calm and slow, the same problem feels manageable, clear, and solvable. This is because the mind that moves slowly has the space to see the situation from multiple angles. It no longer reacts from panic, it responds from understanding. This makes you mentally stronger than people who rush through life reacting to everything without ever stopping to think. A person who walks slowly is not lost, they are grounded. They are not behind, they are aligned. They are not weak, they are powerful in a way that most people never get to experience. Because the slow path teaches you the one thing speed cannot give you: conscious awareness. Awareness of your thoughts, your patterns, your triggers, your desires, your wounds, your strengths, and your purpose. This awareness becomes your inner compass, guiding your steps with clarity and confidence. Another form of strength that the slow path gives you is the ability to face solitude without fear. When you slow down and walk alone, you develop independence, not the type that pushes people away, but the type that makes you emotionally self-sufficient. You learn how to comfort yourself, motivate yourself, heal yourself, and guide yourself. You stop depending on the approval of others. You stop seeking validation. You stop needing constant company to feel safe or valuable. This emotional independence is one of the deepest forms of strength a human being can achieve, because it frees you from the chains of external attachment. The slow path also deepens your relationship with the present moment. You start noticing things you never saw before: the sound of your footsteps, the rhythm of your breath, the temperature of the air, the movement of your thoughts. You begin to live inside your life rather than rushing past it. And as your presence increases, your suffering decreases, because suffering is often created by the mind's inability to stay here and now. When you walk slowly and consciously, your mind returns to the present, where peace naturally lives. Eventually, the slow path makes you unshakable, not because everything in your life becomes perfect, but because you develop the internal strength to handle imperfection without losing your peace. You no longer panic when things go wrong. You no longer crumble under pressure. You no longer get lost in overthinking. You move through life with a calm confidence, knowing that clarity will always come as long as you remain slow, mindful, and centered. And the most beautiful truth is this: the slow path leads to the strongest version of you, not by adding more to your life, but by removing the noise, the rush, the pressure, the expectations, the comparisons, and the mental chaos that once clouded your mind. What remains is a version of you that is clear, grounded, peaceful, wise, intentional, and deeply connected to your inner truth. Walking slowly is not just a physical choice, it is a spiritual practice, a way of living, a way of thinking, a way of being. When you slow down, you discover your true pace. When you walk alone, you discover your true self. And when your mind finds clarity, you discover your true strength. This is the strength that doesn't break. This is the strength that doesn't panic. This is the strength that doesn't disappear when life becomes difficult. This is the strength that stays with you forever. 8. Life becomes understandable only when you stop forcing it. One of the greatest sources of suffering in the modern world is the belief that life must constantly be pushed, controlled, manipulated, managed, and forced into whatever shape we want it to be. People have been conditioned to think that every outcome must be achieved through intensity, pressure, and relentless mental effort. They try to force relationships to work. They try to force themselves to heal faster. They try to force their careers to grow. They try to force their minds to stop overthinking. They try to force clarity to appear. But Buddhism teaches a truth that is as gentle as it is profound. Anything you force becomes heavier, and anything you chase moves further away. Life becomes clearer the moment you stop trying to bend it into your timeline and begin allowing it to unfold in its natural rhythm. When you walk slowly through your life, you begin to realize that nothing meaningful happens through force. The more you push life, the more resistance it gives you. The more you try to control everything, the more exhausted you become. The more you demand answers, the more confused your mind feels. And eventually, you reach a point where the very act of trying becomes the barrier between you and the peace you seek. This is why slowing down is not just a mental choice, it is a spiritual practice. It is a conscious surrender of your need to know everything, predict everything, and control everything. It is allowing life to breathe on its own. Most people don't understand that clarity is not something you create. It is something you notice. It is something that appears naturally when the mind is no longer pressured. Just like muddy water clears when left undisturbed, your thoughts become clear when you stop shaking them with constant worry. Forcing life is like stirring the mud harder, hoping it becomes clear faster. It never works. The more you stir, the cloudier it becomes. But when you pause, when you soften, when you step back, the dirt sinks on its own and clarity rises without your effort. This is not weakness. It is the intelligence of letting life settle into order. Walking slowly alone teaches you this truth better than any book or teacher. When your pace is gentle, you begin noticing how naturally things fall into place when you don't interfere excessively. You realize that the answers you once chased begin coming to you on their own when your mind is quiet enough to hear them. You see how problems that felt impossible slowly shift into solutions when you stop obsessing over them. You understand how decisions that once felt heavy suddenly become simple when your emotions settle. This is the power of non-forcing, the art of letting understanding arise instead of extracting it. One of the reasons people force life so intensely is because they fear uncertainty. They believe that if they slow down, they will lose control. If they loosen their grip, things will fall apart. If they relax, life will collapse. But the truth is the opposite. Life begins falling apart because the grip has become too tight. When you hold something too tightly, a relationship, a dream, a plan, an identity, you suffocate it. You drain the space from it. You remove its ability to breathe and evolve. This is why some of the most painful experiences in life come from trying to preserve things that naturally wanted to change. When you stop forcing life, you begin to trust it. You begin to trust that what is meant for you will naturally align with your path. You begin to trust that what leaves was never meant to stay. You begin to trust that life has its own intelligence, its own timing, its own direction, and its own lessons for you. Lessons you cannot see when you are in a state of haste or desperation. And when you walk slowly, you notice this intelligence guiding you subtly. You feel its presence in your intuition, in your emotions, in the opportunities that appear, in the people who come and go, in the internal shifts that quietly change your direction. Slowness invites wisdom, and wisdom invites acceptance. Acceptance not as resignation, but as a deep understanding that some things unfold exactly as they must. Acceptance is not giving up. Acceptance is letting go of the illusion that you were ever in control of everything. Acceptance is releasing the mental struggle that comes from resisting what already is. Acceptance is allowing reality to be your teacher instead of your enemy. And when you cultivate this acceptance, your mind becomes light. The emotional weight you once carried begins to soften. The overthinking that once consumed you begins to fade. The fear that once drove your actions begins to loosen its grip. When you force life, you become blind. When you allow life, your inner eyes open. You begin to see patterns, reasons, connections, and meanings that were invisible before. You begin to understand why certain things didn't work out, why certain people couldn't stay, why certain plans fell apart, why certain paths closed. You begin to see how every ending was quietly preparing you for a beginning you couldn't yet see. You begin to understand that life wasn't punishing you, it was guiding you. But you could not recognize that guidance when you were moving too fast, demanding answers, drowning in noise, and forcing life to match your expectations. This is why the slow path leads to a wiser you. A you who doesn't break under uncertainty. A you who doesn't panic when something unexpected happens. A you who doesn't collapse under emotional pressure. Because a slow mind is a stable mind, and a stable mind sees truth clearly. A rushed mind sees everything through the distortion of fear and urgency. When you slow down, life stops looking like a threat and starts looking like a journey. You develop a strength that does not come from controlling life, but from flowing with it. Allowing life does not mean becoming passive or doing nothing. It means replacing force with intention, replacing hurry with awareness, replacing resistance with presence. It means taking steps that feel aligned instead of steps that feel pressured. It means moving forward without trying to predict the entire road. It means letting clarity come naturally at the right moment instead of demanding it before you're ready. When you live this way, your life does not slow down, your suffering does. The slow path also protects your energy in ways you do not notice immediately. When you're constantly forcing life, you drain yourself emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and even physically. Your body stays tense. Your mind stays chaotic. Your heart stays restless. But when you move slowly, you conserve your energy. You learn how to use strength only when necessary. You stop wasting emotional power on battles that don't matter. You no longer feel exhausted at the end of every day because you are not fighting life anymore, you are moving with it. Eventually, you begin to experience one of the deepest forms of peace, the peace that comes from no longer forcing outcomes. You stop needing things to happen immediately. You stop craving constant progress. You stop demanding guarantees. You begin appreciating small steps, small improvements, small moments of clarity. You begin trusting the process instead of hating it. You begin trusting yourself instead of doubting every decision. You begin trusting life instead of fearing it. And slowly, without even realizing it, you become someone who is no longer controlled by circumstances. You become someone who can stay centered in chaos. You become someone who can adapt without losing yourself. You become someone who can wait without suffering. You become someone who can move forward without hesitation. You become someone who is not swayed by pressure, noise, or fear. You become someone whose strength comes from presence rather than force. This is the kind of strength that lasts. This is the kind of clarity that stays. This is the kind of peace that cannot be taken away. Life becomes understandable only when you stop forcing it. And you stop forcing life the moment you learn to slow down, trust the timing, walk alone when you need to, and let clarity come to you in its own natural rhythm. 9. You find yourself only when you stop running from yourself. One of the deepest truths in Buddhism is that suffering begins the moment you become disconnected from yourself. And in the modern world, this disconnection is more common than ever. People run from themselves without even realizing it. They run through distractions, through busyness, through chaos, through noise, through endless responsibilities that leave no room for silence. They run into social media, into conversations that mean nothing, into relationships that fill empty spaces temporarily, into habits that numb the mind instead of healing it. They run from their emotions, from their fears, from their wounds, from their loneliness, from their truth. But the more they run, the further they drift from who they really are. Buddhism teaches that no matter how far you run, you are always being pulled back to yourself. Your emotions pull you back. Your restlessness pulls you back. Your confusion pulls you back. Your exhaustion pulls you back. Your unhappiness pulls you back. These are not punishments. These are signals. They are reminders from your inner self saying, you cannot live your entire life avoiding what needs to be understood. The mind becomes noisy, not because it is broken, but because it is trying to call you home. When you finally slow down, truly slow down, something remarkable begins to happen. The layers of distraction that once shielded you from yourself begin to dissolve. You start hearing the thoughts you buried. You start feeling the emotions you suppressed. You start noticing the emptiness that speed allowed you to hide. These realizations are uncomfortable at first because they force you to see the parts of yourself you spent years avoiding. But this discomfort is not a sign of weakness. It is the beginning of truth. It is the beginning of self-awareness. It is the beginning of healing. Walking slowly alone creates the space for these truths to rise gently without overwhelming you. When your steps soften, when your breath deepens, when the noise of life fades, Your inner world opens like a long-locked room, finally letting light inside. You begin to understand your patterns, why you react the way you do, why certain memories still hurt, why certain relationships repeat, why certain fears control you. When you run from yourself, these patterns stay hidden. When you slow down, they reveal themselves, and only what is revealed can be healed. One of the reasons people avoid themselves is because self-awareness requires honesty. It requires admitting things you don't want to admit. It requires facing the parts of you that feel fragile. It requires acknowledging your contradictions, your wounds, your mistakes, your unmet needs. But Buddhism teaches that honesty with yourself is not meant to shame you, it is meant to free you. Because the moment you see your internal world clearly, you stop being controlled by it. You stop being a prisoner of unconscious habits. You stop being overwhelmed by emotions you don't understand. You stop repeating the same cycles that keep you suffering. This is why slowing down is so powerful. When you move through life slowly, the truth becomes visible in a gentle way. You begin recognizing that some of your pain is old pain, leftover hurt you never processed. You realize that some of your anxiety comes from living against your own nature. You understand that some of your sadness comes from denying your real needs. You see how much of your stress comes from trying to please people who were never meant to shape your identity. You see how many parts of your personality are simply survival patterns, not your true self. The slow path allows these realizations to surface without rushing you or overwhelming you. It gives you space to feel, to reflect, to breathe through your emotions rather than drown in them. You start accepting your feelings instead of fighting them. You start understanding your fears instead of shaming yourself for having them. You start observing your thoughts instead of getting lost inside them. This gentle self-awareness is one of the most powerful forms of self-discovery. It reconnects you with the version of yourself that existed before fear, before trauma, before expectations, before comparison, the version of you that is naturally peaceful, naturally wise, naturally whole. You also begin to recognize how much of your suffering was caused by abandoning yourself in small ways every day, ignoring your intuition, silencing your emotions, pretending you're okay when you're not, forcing yourself into spaces where your soul feels unwelcome, giving your energy to people who misuse it, saying yes when everything inside you wanted to say no. These self-abandonments pile up over years, and eventually you forget who you are. But slowing down helps you see each of these moments clearly. You begin noticing where you left yourself behind. And once you see it, you can return. Walking slowly alone also helps you reclaim your identity from the world. When you are constantly surrounded by people, constantly influenced by opinions, constantly absorbing the emotions of others, you lose sight of your own inner compass. You start living through other people's expectations, desires, and dreams instead of your own. But solitude strips away those layers. When you walk alone, you are not performing. You are not being watched. You are not trying to impress, prove, or adapt. You are simply being. And in that state of being, you reconnect with what is real. You feel the difference between what is yours and what is not. You rediscover your own voice after years of hearing everyone else's louder. The slow path also teaches you how to treat yourself with compassion. When you run from yourself, you judge yourself harshly. You criticize your feelings, you reject your needs, you mock your weaknesses. But when you slow down, you begin seeing your pain with softer eyes. You begin understanding that your reactions were shaped by experiences. Your fears were shaped by past wounds. Your anger was shaped by emotional neglect. Your insecurities were shaped by childhood narratives. Instead of judging yourself, you start comforting yourself. You become a friend to your own soul instead of an enemy to your own mind. If you stay committed to the slow path, eventually something profound happens. You develop inner companionship. You no longer fear being alone because solitude no longer feels empty. It feels safe. It feels grounding. It feels like a return to your center. You begin to enjoy your own presence. You begin to trust your own wisdom. You begin to rely on your own intuition. You begin to feel at home in your own mind. This is the deepest form of strength a person can achieve, the strength of being complete within yourself. And once you stop running from yourself, life becomes less frightening. Challenges feel different because you face them with awareness instead of avoidance. Decisions become clearer because you make them from alignment instead of fear. Relationships feel healthier because you enter them from wholeness instead of emptiness. Opportunities become easier to navigate because you no longer doubt your inner guidance. This is the transformation that happens when you slow your steps, slow your thoughts, slow your reactions, slow your life. You finally meet the real you. You were never lost. You were simply moving too fast to see yourself. And the moment you slow down, your true self rises like the sun after a long night. The slow path doesn't just give you clarity, it gives you back you. 10. Peace enters your life the moment you stop living in yesterday and tomorrow. If there is one truth that explains why so many people feel exhausted, overwhelmed, anxious, and disconnected from themselves, it is this. Very few people actually live in the present moment. The body may be here, but the mind is always elsewhere. Some minds live in yesterday, replaying old memories, reliving old pain, rethinking past mistakes, questioning decisions that can no longer be changed, holding conversations that already ended, and carrying emotional burdens that should have been released long ago. Other minds live in tomorrow, worrying about outcomes that have not happened, imagining scenarios that may never occur, fearing the unknown, planning endlessly, and trying to control a future they cannot see. Buddhism teaches that suffering is not found in the present moment. Suffering is found when the mind resists the present moment. When the mind wanders into the past, there is regret. When it wanders into the future, there is fear. But when it rests here, in this moment, there is peace. Even if life is imperfect, even if situations are difficult, the mind becomes calm the moment it truly arrives in the now. But people rarely allow themselves to arrive. They rush through life, living in timelines that no longer exist. They run mentally, even when their bodies stand still. And the more they run, the further they drift from the only place where clarity and peace can live, the present. Walking slowly is one of the most powerful ways to return the mind to the moment. When you walk slowly, your attention shifts from the noise in your head to the movement of your steps, the rhythm of your breath, the sensations in your body, the subtle sounds around you. You begin to feel your life again, instead of thinking about it. You start noticing the breeze on your skin, the warmth of the sun, the sound of your footsteps, the rise and fall of your breathing. These details may seem small, but they are anchors. Anchors that pull your mind out of yesterday and tomorrow and bring it gently into the now. Most people are not aware of how much emotional weight they carry simply because their minds are stuck in the past. Old hurts that were never healed, old conversations that left scars, old failures that shaped their confidence, old moments where they felt misunderstood, unloved, unimportant, or unseen. These moments live inside the mind like shadows, appearing again and again through triggers, reactions, and emotional patterns. When someone rushes through life, they have no time to examine these wounds. So the wounds remain open. The pain remains active. The past stays alive inside them. But when they slow down, the mind finally has room to process these experiences. The emotions that were pushed aside rise gently, asking to be understood, asking to be felt, asking to be released. This emotional release is not possible when life is lived at high speed. It requires slowness, spaciousness, quietness, the conditions that allow healing to begin. The future, too, becomes less frightening when your pace slows. When you are rushing, the mind creates fear-based narratives. It imagines the worst. It exaggerates risks. It obsesses over what might happen. It panics about outcomes it cannot control. But when you slow down and bring your awareness to the present moment, these imagined futures lose their power. You begin to see that most of your worries exist only in your mind, not in reality. You realize that the future will not be shaped by panic, but by presence. You understand that clarity comes not from trying to predict the future, but from grounding yourself fully in the decisions you are making today. Walking slowly teaches you this in a very simple way. Every step becomes a metaphor for life. You don't walk by trying to jump to the end of the path. You walk by taking one step at a time. You don't rush to the destination. You simply focus on the step beneath your feet. When you apply this principle to your entire life, everything becomes clearer. You stop trying to control things you cannot control. You stop forcing answers that are not ready to appear. You stop demanding certainty from an uncertain world. Instead, you focus on what is here, the current moment, the current emotion, the current step. Buddhism teaches that when you finally enter the present moment, you gain access to a level of peace that cannot be found anywhere else. This is because the present moment carries no judgment. The past carries judgment. The future carries fear. But the now carries neither. The now is simply a space for you to breathe, to exist, to observe, to be. The now does not demand anything from you. It simply invites you to live. As you walk slowly, you begin to notice something profound. The mind is naturally peaceful when it is not being dragged through time. The chaos does not come from the present moment. The chaos comes from the mind's refusal to stay in the present moment. When you train yourself to return again and again to your breath, your steps, your awareness, your senses, your inner stillness, you begin to understand that peace is not something you must chase. Peace is something that already exists beneath the layers of mental noise you have been carrying. Over time, your relationship with yourself begins to change. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to understand yourself more deeply. You begin to become kinder to yourself. Because the present moment softens judgment, it dissolves comparison, it reduces fear, it reconnects you to your own humanity. When you truly live in the now, you realize that everything you thought you needed to be happy status, approval, speed, perfection, were illusions created by the restless mind. Life feels different when you slow down. Stress does not grip you the same way. Problems do not overwhelm you the same way. Fear does not control you the same way. You become someone who responds to life with clarity instead of reacting with impulse. You become someone who sees reality as it is, instead of as your fears paint it. You become someone who experiences life fully, instead of rushing through it mindlessly. The slow path shows you that the present moment is your greatest teacher. It teaches you patience. It teaches you acceptance. It teaches you awareness. It teaches you how to breathe through discomfort instead of running from it. It teaches you how to find calm in uncertainty. It teaches you how to trust the natural unfolding of life. And perhaps the most beautiful truth of all, when you finally stop living in yesterday and tomorrow, you begin to feel alive for the first time. Not busy, not distracted, not pressured, but alive fully, deeply, peacefully alive. And in that aliveness, you find a version of yourself that you never knew existed. Shi, clarity, arrives when you learn to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. One of the greatest misunderstandings about peace is the belief that peace comes from removing everything uncomfortable from your life. Many people think that peace means the absence of pain, the absence of uncertainty, the absence of challenges, the absence of stress, the absence of difficult emotions. But Buddhism teaches a truth that completely reverses this idea. Real peace is not found by avoiding discomfort. It is found by learning how to sit with it, breathe through it, and understand it. True clarity begins the moment you stop running from discomfort and begin listening to what it's trying to teach you. Most people move quickly through life, not because they are truly busy, but because they want to outrun their own feelings. They avoid silence because silence exposes their fears. They avoid solitude because solitude exposes their emptiness. They avoid slowing down because slowing down exposes the thoughts they've been suppressing. They avoid emotional stillness because stillness exposes their wounds. So they fill their days with distractions, noise, conversations, screens, work, entertainment, anything that keeps them from confronting the discomfort inside them. This avoidance creates a life of running without arrival. They run and run and run, but nothing changes. Their problems don't disappear. Their pain doesn't heal. Their anxiety doesn't fade. Their confusion doesn't resolve. Because running only delays healing, it never creates it. Discomfort doesn't dissolve simply because you ignore it. It sits inside you, quietly shaping your reactions, your relationships, your decisions, and your identity. The more you run, the deeper it roots itself. Walking slowly breaks this cycle completely. When your body slows, your mind can no longer hide behind speed. Your thoughts begin rising, your emotions begin surfacing, your memories begin appearing. The discomfort you buried begins knocking softly, asking to be seen. At first, this can feel overwhelming, not because the emotions are too big, but because you have spent so many years avoiding them. But Buddhism teaches that any emotion you're willing to sit with loses its power to control you. You don't have to solve it immediately. You don't have to understand it fully. You simply have to create the space for it. Sitting with discomfort means allowing yourself to feel without judging yourself. It means recognizing that your difficult emotions are not failures. They are signals. Signals that something inside you needs attention. Signals that something needs to be healed. Signals that something is trying to speak. Feelings are messages. Running from them is like leaving letters unopened your entire life. Slowing down allows you to finally open them, one by one. Discomfort is simply a form of truth that feels unfamiliar. It is the part of you that wants to grow but doesn't know how. It is the part of you that wants to heal but doesn't know where to begin. It is the part of you that has been misunderstood, ignored, abandoned, minimized, or suppressed. When you sit with this discomfort gently and patiently, something miraculous begins to happen. It transforms. What once felt overwhelming becomes understandable. What once felt threatening becomes manageable. What once felt heavy begins to soften. Walking slowly alone helps you develop this emotional resilience. When you take each step mindfully, when you breathe softly, when you focus on the present moment, you create a container for discomfort to rise without drowning you. You become the observer instead of the victim of your emotions. You begin noticing patterns in your discomfort. Which memories hurt the most? Which fears return again and again? Which insecurities trigger your reactions? Which internal stories shape your decisions? Which unhealed wound your mind keeps circling around? These observations bring awareness, and awareness brings relief. Not instantly, but gradually, the way morning light slowly fills a dark room. The more you sit with discomfort, the more clarity you gain about your internal world. You begin understanding the roots of your pain instead of just its symptoms. You begin understanding why you avoid certain things, why certain people trigger you, why certain thoughts disturb you, why certain choices feel impossible. Discomfort is the doorway to clarity, but most people keep the door locked. They push the discomfort away, not realizing that everything they are searching for, healing, understanding, peace, is waiting on the other side. The slow path teaches you that discomfort is not the enemy, resistance is. What hurts you is not the emotion itself, but your refusal to feel it. When you resist discomfort, it becomes tension. When you fear discomfort, it becomes suffering. When you avoid discomfort, it becomes confusion. But when you meet discomfort with openness, it becomes wisdom. When you sit with it long enough, it becomes transformation. It is through discomfort that people discover their resilience. It is through discomfort that people discover their patterns. It is through discomfort that people discover their truth. It is through discomfort that people discover who they were always meant to be. When you stop running from discomfort, you stop running from yourself. You start hearing the messages your soul has been trying to communicate for years. You start seeing the parts of you that were wounded, misunderstood, neglected, or silenced. You start reclaiming the parts of you that were hidden behind fear. You begin finding clarity about what you want, what you don't want, what you value, and what you need to let go of. Most importantly, sitting with discomfort teaches you compassion, not just for others, but for yourself. You stop punishing yourself for feeling deeply. You stop criticizing yourself for struggling. You stop expecting yourself to be strong all the time. You stop believing that you are broken simply because you have emotions that hurt. You begin treating yourself with softness, patience, and understanding. That self-compassion becomes the foundation of your healing, and healing becomes the foundation of your clarity. Eventually, you begin to realize that discomfort was never a punishment, it was a teacher. A teacher guiding you back to your inner truth. A teacher showing you where you abandoned yourself. A teacher pointing you toward the parts of yourself that needed love. A teacher reminding you that genuine peace comes not from avoiding life, but from experiencing it fully with awareness. When you walk slowly, breathe deeply, and remain present with the discomfort rising inside you, the discomfort begins to fade. Not because the pain magically disappears, but because your relationship with it changes. You no longer fear it. You no longer resist it. You no longer run from it. You meet it with understanding. You give it space. You let it soften. You let it speak. You let it teach. And in that teaching, clarity begins to flow into your mind, like water filling a dry riverbed. The slow path gives you the courage to face the parts of yourself you were scared to meet. And in facing them, you discover a powerful truth. You were never broken. You were hurt, but not destroyed. You were lost, but not gone. You were overwhelmed, but not weak. And the moment you stop running, you begin returning. Returning to your center, returning to your breath, returning to your clarity, returning to yourself. 12. Your inner world shapes your outer reality. Slow down, and you will see the truth. There is a teaching in Buddhism that many people misunderstand when they hear it for the first time. Your outer life is always a reflection of your inner world. For some, this sounds mystical. For others, it sounds too simple to be true. But when you begin slowing your life down, truly slowing down, you start to see the truth behind this teaching with unmistakable clarity. You begin realizing that your relationships, your reactions, your decisions, your emotions, your opportunities, your level of peace, and even the outcomes you attract are not random events. They are mirrors. Mirrors showing you the state of your inner world. Mirrors showing you parts of yourself you've ignored. Mirrors showing you what needs attention, what needs healing, what needs letting go, and what needs nurturing. But when you move too fast, you do not see these mirrors. You crash through life without observing it. You react without understanding. You decide without awareness. You blame circumstances without recognizing the internal patterns that create them. Slowing down is the doorway to this realization. When your pace softens, when your mind stops running, when your nervous system relaxes, you begin seeing connections that were invisible before. You begin noticing how your internal case creates external case, how your internal peace creates external clarity, how your internal fears attract experiences that validate those fears, how your internal calm allows solutions to appear naturally. The world outside begins making sense only when the world inside becomes quiet enough for you to hear it. Most people live their entire lives believing that their struggles are created by the world around them. Toxic people, difficult circumstances, unfair situations, destiny, bad luck, lack of opportunity. And while external circumstances do influence life, Buddhism teaches that the deepest suffering does not come from external conditions. It comes from the way your inner world responds to them. A chaotic mind turns small challenges into disasters. A peaceful mind turns huge obstacles into stepping stones. A fearful mind sees danger everywhere. A calm mind sees possibilities. A tired mind sees life as burdensome. A rested mind sees life with clarity. The difference is not the world, it is the state of the person experiencing it. Walking slowly alone reveals this truth more clearly than anything else. When you walk with awareness, you begin observing your reactions in real time. You notice how quickly your mind jumps to conclusions. You notice how easily your emotions get triggered. You notice how certain memories influence your present feelings. You notice how much fear or doubt shapes your decisions. You notice how your thoughts create stories about people or situations that don't match reality. These moments of awareness are small, but powerful. They show you that the outer world is not the problem, your relationship with it is. The slow path teaches you to take responsibility for your inner world, not as a burden, but as an act of empowerment. When you understand that your internal state shapes your experience, you stop fighting everything outside of you. You stop blaming, resisting, or wishing life were different. Instead, you begin turning inward not to escape, but to understand. You begin noticing the emotions that need release. You begin identifying the beliefs that need to be questioned. You begin recognizing the wounds that need to be healed. You begin seeing the patterns that need to be broken. You begin understanding the fears that need compassion. This is not a fast process. It requires slowness, patience, and presence. You cannot transform your inner world while rushing. You cannot gain self-awareness while running. You cannot heal while drowning in overstimulation. You cannot understand yourself while living on autopilot. Transformation requires stillness, and stillness requires slowing down. This is why the slow path is not merely a lifestyle, it is a spiritual practice. It is a commitment to seeing life clearly instead of reacting to it blindly. As you explore your inner world with gentle curiosity, you begin realizing how many of your external struggles were reflections of your internal ones. You notice how your relationships mirror your self-worth, how your career mirrors your inner confidence, how your boundaries mirror your level of self-respect, how your emotional triggers mirror your unhealed wounds, how your stress mirrors your lack of presence, how your loneliness mirrors your disconnection from yourself. These insights are not always comfortable, but they are liberating. They allow you to see that change is not impossible, it simply begins within. The more you walk slowly, the more you begin to notice the subtle shifts happening inside you. Your reactions soften, your emotions settle, your thoughts slow, your awareness expands. You begin responding to situations with clarity rather than impulse. You begin speaking with intention rather than frustration. You begin choosing peace over unnecessary conflict. You begin noticing when your mind starts to create stories that don't match reality. You begin catching your fears before they take over your decisions. These small internal shifts create massive external changes. Because when the inner world transforms, the outer world naturally follows. Slowing down also helps you uncover the illusions you once lived under, illusions about yourself, about others, about life. You begin realizing how much of your identity was shaped by fear or insecurity. How many of your goals were shaped by comparison? How many of your relationships were shaped by loneliness instead of real connection? How many of your choices were shaped by pressure rather than alignment? These realizations are painful but necessary. They strip away the false layers that kept you disconnected from your true self. When you remove these illusions, you begin seeing life from a place of truth instead of fear. And in this truth, you discover something profound. Life has always been communicating with you through experiences, through challenges, through emotions, through silence. But you could not hear it when you were moving too fast. You could not understand it when your mind was overstimulated. You could not see it when your awareness was scattered. The slow path gives you the stillness needed to receive these messages with clarity. Every frustration becomes a lesson. Every disappointment becomes a guide. Every emotional trigger becomes a mirror. Every moment of confusion becomes an invitation to go inward. Life stops being something happening to you and becomes something happening for your growth. As your inner world becomes quieter, your outer life becomes simpler. You no longer seek conflict. You no longer chase validation. You no longer get trapped in overthinking. You no longer allow your emotions to dictate your choices. You become someone who lives intentionally, not reactively. Someone who trusts themselves. Someone who understands the deeper meaning of their experiences. Someone who knows how to maintain peace even when the world becomes chaotic. With time, you begin feeling a deep shift. A shift from being controlled by life to coexisting with it. You begin aligning with your true nature. You begin listening to your intuition more than your fear. You begin making decisions that honor your peace. You begin choosing relationships that nourish your inner world. You begin creating a life that feels authentic rather than impressive. This is the power of understanding that your inner world shapes your outer world. It gives you the ability to create change from the inside out. And eventually, you begin living with a quiet strength that cannot be taken away. Not because your life is perfect, but because you have learned how to keep your inner world steady even when your outer world is uncertain. You become someone who walks slowly, sees clearly, feels deeply, and moves through life with wisdom instead of haste. You become someone who understands that peace is not found in controlling life, but in understanding it. And understanding begins with slowing down and seeing the truth inside yourself. The slow path reveals the miracle hidden in plain sight. Your life changes the moment you do. Your clarity expands the moment your awareness expands. Your peace appears the moment your inner world becomes quiet. And the world outside becomes healing the moment the world inside becomes whole. 13. Life becomes lighter the moment you stop carrying what isn't yours. One of the most overlooked truths about human suffering is that a large part of the emotional weight you carry does not actually belong to you. You wake up heavy, move through the day heavy, sleep heavy, and live heavy, not because your life is unbearable, but because you have unknowingly taken responsibility for burdens that are not yours to hold. The expectations of people around you, the opinions they project onto you, the emotional pain they hand you, the guilt they place on your shoulders, the pressure society pushes onto your identity slowly, silently. These things accumulate within you. And because you move fast through life, because you never stop long enough to observe what you're carrying, you begin thinking that all of it is yours. But Buddhism teaches that freedom begins the moment you question the weight inside you, because not everything inside you belongs to you. Slowing down is the first step toward this realization. When your pace softens, when your mind stops rushing, when your awareness becomes still, you begin noticing the difference between what is yours and what is not. You begin noticing how much stress comes from trying to meet expectations that were never aligned with your nature. You begin noticing how much guilt comes from trying to please people who were never meant to direct your life. You begin noticing how much exhaustion comes from trying to be someone you are not. You begin noticing how much anxiety comes from carrying the emotional wounds of others, absorbing their moods, their fears, their projections, their disappointments. On the slow path, these realizations rise gently, like dust settling in sunlight. Walking slowly alone helps you see the emotional and mental weight you've carried for years without question. You begin noticing that some of your fears were inherited from others. Some of your beliefs were shaped by people who never understood you. Some of your insecurities came from the way others treated you. not from any truth about yourself. Some of your habits came from survival, not from authenticity. Some of your worries were absorbed from parents, friends, family, partners, or society, not from your own real experiences. Slowing down creates the space to separate your truth from the noise of others. And for the first time, you begin asking questions that change everything. Why am I carrying this? Where did this belief come from? Who told me I needed to be this way? Why does this memory still control me? Why do I feel responsible for other people's emotions? Why do I feel guilty for choosing myself? Who convinced me I was not enough? Who taught me to sacrifice my peace just to be loved? These questions, when asked in stillness, begin unraveling the invisible threads, holding you to your emotional burdens. You start realizing that many of these burdens never belonged to you. They were placed on you. You simply accepted them because no one taught you that you were allowed to put them down. One of the most painful patterns people carry is emotional responsibility. The belief that they must fix the emotions of others, carry their pain, absorb their dissatisfaction, or solve problems they did not create. This pattern often comes from childhood, from growing up in environments where you had to take on more than you should have. But when you walk slowly and examine these patterns, you begin to understand that you cannot heal anyone by sacrificing your own peace. You cannot carry someone's emotional load without dropping your own dreams. You cannot save people who are committed to staying in their pain. And you cannot carry wounds that do not belong to you simply because you are afraid to hurt someone by putting them down. On the slow path, you begin learning the spiritual discipline of letting go, not just of people, but of their emotional imprint within you. You begin letting go of beliefs that limit you, letting go of guilt that was never yours, letting go of shame that was taught, not earned, letting go of responsibilities that were never meant to be yours, letting go of silent burdens you carried because you thought it made you a good person, letting go of the pressure to be perfect, to please everyone, to carry everything alone. And as you let go, your inner world becomes lighter. Not because life becomes perfect, but because your relationship with your inner weight changes. You stop seeing letting go as abandonment and start seeing it as liberation. You stop seeing self-care as selfishness and start seeing it as survival. You stop seeing boundaries as rejection and start seeing them as respect for your own energy. Another form of weight you carry unknowingly is emotional memory. Memories that were never resolved but were simply buried. These memories appear as triggers, insecurities, or unexplained sadness. When you slow down, you finally create the mental spaciousness to face these memories without fear. You begin understanding that your past does not need to be relived, but it does need to be acknowledged. Every emotion you avoided becomes heavier over time. Every memory you suppressed eventually becomes a shadow controlling your reactions. But when you walk slowly and let these feelings rise, they begin releasing naturally. What once felt like a storm becomes a passing cloud. You also begin noticing how much weight you carry from the future imagined, scenarios, fears, expectations, pressures, worries. The mind creates heavy futures when the present moment is full of noise. But when you slow down, when you ground yourself in your breath and your steps, the future stops feeling overwhelming. You begin realizing that you don't have to carry tomorrow today. You begin noticing that most of your fear comes from imagination, not reality. And you begin understanding that the future becomes lighter when the mind becomes quieter. Slowing down doesn't just help you identify the weight. It helps you understand why you carried it for so long. You begin realizing that you held on to certain burdens because they made you feel useful. You held on to certain identities because they made you feel valued. You held on to certain emotions because they felt familiar. You clung to certain relationships because they made you feel needed. But as your awareness deepens, you begin understanding that these patterns were not love, they were survival. And you are allowed to outgrow survival. Walking slowly alone helps you create the emotional distance needed to see your life clearly. You begin recognizing that you cannot grow while carrying the weight of everything you've ever experienced. You cannot move forward while dragging the past behind you. You cannot find clarity while carrying the confusion of others. You cannot discover your true voice while holding on to the expectations placed on you. You cannot live freely while holding on to all the stories that no longer represent you. When you finally give yourself permission to put the weight down mentally, emotionally, spiritually, the world around you changes. People who once drained you lose their power over your mind. Situations that once triggered you no longer disturb your peace. Habits that once controlled you begin to fall away. Clarity appears not because life stops being hard, but because your mind stops being heavy. You begin experiencing a lighter form of existence, one where peace is not something you chase, but something you uncover. One where clarity is not something you force, but something that rises naturally. One where healing is not something you struggle for, but something that unfolds gently. Buddhism teaches that letting go is not about losing. It is about returning to yourself, returning to awareness, returning to freedom. When you put down what isn't yours, your hands become free to carry what truly matters. Your mind becomes free to think clearly. Your heart becomes free to love without fear. Your spirit becomes free to walk its path without being weighed down by unnecessary burdens. And you begin to see life differently, not as a constant struggle, but as a journey that becomes lighter the moment you stop carrying what is not yours. This is the power of slowing down. It reveals what you must release. It reveals who you are without the weight. It reveals the peace that was waiting under everything you held for years. The slow path doesn't just give you clarity, it gives you permission to finally put the weight down. 14. Your mind finds clarity when you stop letting the world rush. There is a hidden pressure that almost every person in the world carries, even if they never speak about it. It is the pressure to keep up, to move fast, to stay relevant, to match the speed of society, to hurry through life as if slowing down means failure. From a young age, people are told that life is a race, a competition where the ones who move quickly are rewarded and the ones who move slowly fall behind. You must choose fast, respond fast, decide fast, heal fast, achieve fast, grow fast, improve fast. And because of this conditioning, many people live their lives feeling as if every moment is a deadline, every emotion is an interruption, and every pause is dangerous. They learn to move faster than their minds can process, faster than their hearts can understand, faster than their souls can breathe. But Buddhism teaches a completely different truth. Your mind cannot find clarity when it's moving at the world's speed. Your mind finds clarity only when it's allowed to move at its own speed. The speed of your breath, the speed of your awareness, the speed of your inner rhythm, the pace your soul has been quietly begging you to return to. The world pushes you to hurry. Your inner wisdom pushes you to slow down. The world rewards speed. Your spirit rewards presence. The world pressures you to catch up. Your intuition reminds you that you are not behind, you are simply overwhelmed. Walking slowly alone is the antidote to this world-created urgency. When you walk slowly, something magical happens. You begin reclaiming your natural pace. You begin remembering that life is not a race. You begin feeling the difference between speed and clarity. You begin noticing how much mental noise disappears when you stop rushing. You begin realizing that the pressure you thought was real was mostly imagined, a product of comparison, culture, and conditioning, not truth. Most people do not realize how much of their stress comes from this silent, constant pressure to be faster than their emotions, faster than their healing, faster than their thoughts. They think they are stressed because life is difficult, but much of their suffering actually comes from trying to live at a pace that was never meant for them. When you are always rushed, your mind becomes scattered. Your body becomes tense. Your decisions become reactive. Your emotions become suppressed. And eventually, your clarity begins to break down. You stop knowing what you want. You stop knowing who you are. You stop knowing what matters. You stop knowing what direction feels right. You stop knowing which voice inside you is intuition and which one is fear. All because you never slow down long enough to listen. The slow path helps you see how unnatural speed has become. Human beings were not made to move at digital speed. Your biology is ancient. Your nervous system is ancient. Your emotional system is ancient. But the pace of the world is modern, faster than the human mind can sustain without losing its center. You cannot outrun your nature. You cannot force clarity into a mind that has been overloaded. You cannot expect wisdom to arise in a nervous system that has no time to settle. You cannot expect deep insight from a heart that is always rushing. But when you slow down, your entire being begins to realign. Your thoughts stop colliding. Your emotions stop spilling into one another. Your presence returns to your body. Your breath becomes deeper. Your awareness expands. Your inner voice becomes clearer. Clarity is not created by thinking harder. It is created by thinking slower. It is created by giving your mind the spaciousness it needs to process life gently. Walking slowly teaches you to reconnect with your senses. You feel the ground beneath your feet. You hear the quiet sounds you normally ignore. You sense the subtle shifts in your body. You become aware of your breath. This sensory presence pulls your mind out of the imaginary deadlines, imaginary comparisons, imaginary fears, and imaginary urgency the world has embedded into your thinking. You begin seeing life for what it is, not a sprint, but a journey. Slowing down also allows you to detach from the illusion of falling behind. You begin noticing that the people you compare yourself to are also struggling. You begin realizing that everyone is dealing with something unseen. You begin understanding that life is not linear and progress is not a straight line. You begin feeling compassion for your own pace instead of judgment. You begin allowing yourself to grow at a speed that honors your nervous system instead of punishing it. One of the most profound shifts that happens when you stop letting the world rush you is that you become more intentional. When you slow down, your decisions come from alignment, not panic. You stop saying yes to things that drain you. You stop rushing into commitments that don't reflect who you truly are. You stop chasing goals that were never yours to begin with. You stop letting external pressure shape your identity. Instead of reacting to life, you begin responding to it. Instead of being pulled by urgency, you begin being guided by inner clarity. As you walk slowly, you begin seeing your internal world with more precision. You notice the subtle signs your body gives before stress takes over. You notice the emotions that rise before they turn into storms. You notice the thoughts that appear before they turn into cycles. You notice the intuitive whispers that get drowned out when you move too fast. These tiny signals guide you toward the life you are meant to live, but you cannot hear them unless you slow down. Another powerful transformation happens when you stop letting the world rush you. You stop rushing yourself. You stop forcing healing to happen before you're ready. You stop demanding answers from a mind that is exhausted. You stop criticizing yourself for being human. You stop believing that productivity defines your worth. You begin giving yourself grace. You begin giving yourself room to breathe. You begin giving yourself permission to take your time. This self-compassion opens the door to deep inner healing. When you stop expecting yourself to move at an unnatural pace, your mind relaxes, your heart softens, your body unwinds, your clarity returns. You begin connecting with your true self, the self that was buried under pressure, anxiety, expectations, and speed. You begin feeling the life beneath the noise. And slowly, you begin to notice something incredible. Life itself feels different. When you slow down, life slows down with you. Challenges feel smaller. Conversations feel deeper. Decisions feel easier. Emotions feel more understandable. Relationships feel more meaningful. The world feels more peaceful. Not because the world changed, but because your pace changed. The slow path reconnects you with the natural rhythm of existence. Flowers don't rush to bloom. Trees don't force their branches to grow. Rivers don't hurry to reach the ocean. The sun rises without rushing. The moon cycles without haste. Nature has always moved at the pace of awareness, not urgency. And when you slow your life down, you begin aligning with that natural rhythm. You begin living in harmony instead of resistance. You begin understanding that clarity cannot be rushed, healing cannot be forced, and wisdom cannot be pushed. They arise naturally the moment there is space for them to appear. Eventually, you reach a place where you no longer fear moving slowly. You realize that moving slowly doesn't mean you're behind, it means you're aware. Moving slowly doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're wise. Moving slowly doesn't mean you're failing, it means you're listening. Moving slowly doesn't mean you're lost, it means you're finally finding your true path. Your life begins to feel lighter, calmer, clearer, and more grounded. Because you are no longer living in reaction to the world, you are living in alignment with yourself. This is the gift of slowing down. This is the freedom of rejecting urgency. This is the return to your natural rhythm. This is the beginning of true clarity. And once you stop letting the world rush you, your mind finally has the time to show you the life you were meant to live. 15. Your soul speaks only when your life becomes quiet enough to hear it. There is a voice inside you that has been speaking to you since the day you were born, not through sound, not through language, not through thoughts, but through quiet knowing. This voice is your intuition, your inner wisdom, your soul's guidance, the deeper intelligence within you that always knows what is right for your life, long before your logical mind catches up. But in the modern world, this voice is rarely heard, not because it is weak, but because your life has become too loud, too fast, too busy, too overwhelming, too filled with noise, too filled with responsibilities, too filled with mental clutter, too filled with expectations from others, too filled with distractions that drown out the whispers of your inner truth. Buddhism teaches that the soul does not shout, it whispers. It does not fight for your attention, it waits patiently for you to calm down. It does not push, it guides softly. It does not force, it invites. But you cannot hear what invites you when your life is full of urgent demands. You cannot hear a whisper when you are running. You cannot feel inner guidance when your mind is overstimulated. You cannot sense truth when your emotions are tangled. You cannot receive clarity when your attention is scattered in 100 directions. The soul speaks only when the world inside you becomes quiet. And the world inside you becomes quiet only when you slow down. Walking slowly alone is one of the most powerful ways to reconnect with this inner voice. When your steps become gentle, when your breathing becomes steady, when your attention comes back to the present moment, your inner noise begins to fade. The constant inner commentary weakens, the mental pressure softens, the emotional storms calm, and slowly, beneath the fading noise, the subtle voice of your soul becomes audible again. Not in words, but in feelings, in nudges, in awareness, in sudden clarity, in subtle knowing that rises from a place deeper than thought. Your soul speaks through intuition. It speaks through the sensations in your body. It speaks through the feeling of, this is right, or this is wrong, without needing logical explanation. It speaks through discomfort that tells you something is not aligned. It speaks through excitement that tells you something is calling you. It speaks through peace that tells you something is meant for you. But you cannot hear any of these things when your life moves too fast. Most people spend their lives listening to louder voices, the voice of fear, the voice of insecurity, the voice of social expectation, the voice of anxiety, the voice of pressure, the voice of comparison. These voices scream because they are born from the mind, and the mind is loud when it is untrained. The soul, however, never screams. It does not panic, it does not rush, it does not confuse you. It simply waits for the noise to quiet, so it can finally speak. Slowing down is the process of lowering the volume of the world, so the volume of your inner wisdom can rise. The slow path teaches you to recognize the difference between the voice of your mind and the voice of your soul. The mind is fast, impatient, repetitive, restless, noisy. It argues, it analyzes, it overthinks, it worries, it doubts, it imagines, it fears, it pushes. The soul, however, is calm. It speaks through clarity, not confusion, through ease, not intensity, through alignment, not force, through knowing, not worrying. When you slow your steps, your breath deepens. When your breath deepens, your awareness returns. When your awareness returns, your intuition awakens. And when your intuition awakens, you begin seeing your life through a completely different lens, one that is clearer, wiser, and far quieter than the lens you used when you were rushing. The reason so many people feel lost is not because they lack direction, it is because they cannot hear their own inner direction. They are surrounded by too many external voices telling them who to be, how to live, what to want, and what to fear. These voices drown the inner compass that was always meant to guide them. When you slow down, you begin reclaiming this compass. You begin trusting yourself again. You begin remembering that you do not need the world's approval to know what is right for your life. And as this inner guidance becomes stronger, you begin to feel a shift, the kind of shift that cannot be forced or rushed. You begin noticing that certain people drain your soul. Certain choices pull you away from yourself. Certain environments confuse your inner voice. Certain habits create mental fog. Certain attachments disrupt your inner peace. Without slowing down, you would have never noticed these things. But when your awareness heightens, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. The soul speaks through subtle signs. A sudden heaviness when you think about a certain path. A quiet discomfort when you're around certain people. A gentle resistance when something doesn't align with your values. A calm excitement when a door is meant for you. A deep peace when something is true. A whisper telling you when it is time to walk away. Another whisper telling you when it is time to take a step forward. When you ignore these signs, you experience suffering. When you slow down and honor them, you experience clarity. The slow path also teaches you that your soul is never confused, only your mind is. The mind is shaped by memory, fear, conditioning, and comparison. But the soul is shaped by authenticity, presence, intuition, and truth. When you slow your life down, you begin shifting from mind-led decisions to soul-led decisions. And this changes everything. You begin choosing relationships that honor your inner peace instead of your loneliness. You begin choosing environments that nurture your growth instead of draining your energy. You begin choosing habits that expand your awareness instead of numbing your mind. You begin choosing paths that align with your purpose instead of your fears. You begin choosing a life that feels right instead of one that merely looks right. Your soul is always guiding you toward alignment, but you must create the silence to hear it. Walking slowly alone is a return to that silence. It is a return to your center. It is a return to your truth. It is a return to yourself. Another profound thing happens when life becomes quiet enough for your soul to speak. Your purpose becomes clearer, not in the dramatic, life-changing way people often imagine, but in a gentle, unfolding way. You begin recognizing patterns in what brings you joy. You begin understanding the deeper meaning behind your challenges. You begin noticing what your heart feels called to do. Purpose does not arrive suddenly, it reveals itself in whispers. Those whispers are impossible to hear when your life is rushed. Slowing down also teaches you to trust the timing of your life. When you are always rushing, You feel frustrated when things don't go according to your plan. But when you slow down and connect with your soul's wisdom, you begin realizing that delays are often protection, that closed doors are often direction, that slow periods are often preparation, that discomfort is often guidance. That waiting is often part of becoming the person you need to be before receiving what you're asking for. Your soul sees things your mind cannot. Your soul knows timing, your mind refuses to understand. Your soul understands paths your logic cannot yet comprehend. But the soul never forces, it waits. And it speaks only when you slow down enough to hear. Eventually, something extraordinary happens. As you continue walking slowly, listening deeply, and honoring your inner truth, you begin to experience a level of clarity you never imagined possible. Decisions become easier, relationships become clearer, emotions become understandable, direction becomes more natural, peace becomes more stable. You stop seeking external validation because your soul's voice becomes louder than the voices outside you. You stop fearing the future because your inner guidance becomes a compass that never fails you. You stop carrying confusion because you know how to return to silence and find answers within. And suddenly, you realize something profound. This clarity, this peace, this wisdom was always inside you. It was never missing. It was never lost. It was simply buried under the noise of a life lived too fast. Your soul has been speaking to you for years. You simply needed to slow your life down enough to hear it. This is the deepest gift of the slow path. It reconnects you with the part of yourself that never stopped knowing the way. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that the world they have been running toward is not the world they truly want, and the person they have been trying to become is not the person their soul was quietly asking them to be. That moment is often subtle, an exhaustion you can't explain, an inner heaviness you can't ignore, a quiet sadness beneath the surface, a restlessness that never goes away, a vague feeling that something is missing even when everything seems fine. This moment is not a mistake. It is an invitation to slow down, to step back, to breathe, to observe, to reconnect with yourself in a way you've forgotten how to. The lessons you've explored in this journey all point to a single truth. Clarity does not come from speeding up your life. Clarity comes from slowing down enough that you finally hear what your life has been trying to tell you. Your mind has been overworked for years, carrying other people's expectations, suppressing emotions you didn't know how to handle, trying to stay strong, trying to stay ahead, trying to keep up with a world that has forgotten the value of stillness. But the moment you begin slowing your pace, even slightly, your inner world begins to shift. Your breath deepens, your thoughts loosen, your emotions soften, your awareness returns. And for the first time in a long time, your mind begins to feel safe inside your body. You were not created to live in a constant state of urgency. You were not created to run faster than your emotions can move. You were not created to bury your fears under productivity. You were not created to force clarity through pressure. You were created to feel, to grow, to heal, to expand, to understand, and all of these things require slowness. Walking slowly, alone, is not an escape from life. It is a return to life. It is a return to your breath. It is a return to your senses. It is a return to your intuition. It is a return to your truth. It is a return to the present moment, the only place where real peace exists. When you walk slowly, you see the world with new eyes. You notice the beauty you used to overlook. You feel the emotions you used to suppress. You hear the thoughts you used to ignore. You meet the parts of yourself you abandoned. You reconnect with the version of you that existed before the world taught you to rush. And slowly, gently, something begins to change inside you. You stop seeking validation and start seeking alignment. You stop chasing answers and start receiving them naturally. You stop fearing silence and start craving it. You stop fighting your emotions and start understanding them. You stop forcing your path and start allowing it to unfold. Clarity, the thing you were searching for in speed, arrives in stillness, not as an explosion, but as a soft awakening, not as a breakthrough, but as a quiet remembering, not as something new, but as something ancient and familiar, the truth that was always inside you, waiting for the noise to fade. Your mind becomes clearer, not because life becomes easier, but because you finally become present enough to see life as it is. Your heart becomes lighter because you stop carrying the weight that was never yours. Your soul becomes stronger because you stop silencing its voice. And your path becomes visible because you stop rushing past the signs. This is the paradox of life. The slower you move, the faster you understand. The quieter you become, the louder your intuition speaks. The more alone you are, the more you realize you were never truly alone. Your inner wisdom has always been with you. So, walk slowly, walk gently, walk with awareness, walk with presence. Walk in a way that honors your nervous system, your heart, your mind, your soul. Walk alone until you no longer feel lonely. Walk alone until silence becomes your teacher. Walk alone until your emotions stop frightening you. Walk alone until your thoughts stop controlling you. Walk alone until your past stops chasing you. Walk alone until your future stops scaring you. Walk alone until you return to yourself. Because when you walk slowly, you eventually discover the truth you were searching for in the rush. Your mind is not broken, it is overwhelmed. Your heart is not weak, it is tired. Your soul is not lost, it is waiting. Your path is not unclear, you just needed to slow down long enough to see it. And the moment you finally walk slowly, quietly, alone, your mind finds clarity, your heart finds peace, your soul finds its voice, and your life begins again, softer, wiser, simpler, truer. This is the way back to yourself. This is the medicine your mind has been asking for. This is the journey that changes everything.